colleagues, delegates, it is an honor to welcome you to this important side event on the issue of arbitrary detention in the context of COPs. As we stand on the brink of one of the most critical gatherings for global climate action, it is vital that we remember that effective climate solutions cannot exist in isolation in the broader context of human rights. That is why, at this event, we will elaborate on negative implications of arbitrary detention at the host countries of UN climate change conferences. Let me present you our esteemed panelists for today. Mr. Khalid Ibrahim, Executive Director of the Gulf Center for Human Rights. Mr. Emin Husseinov, a founding member of the Climate Observers Partnership. Ms. Diana Nazareth, member of the Climate Observers Partnership. And Mr. Yves Vlado, Earth Justice Representative to the UN in Geneva. And joining us by video, Mr. Florian Erminger, representative of Progress and Change Action Lab. Before we begin, I would like to remind you about the UN rules which prohibits taking photos or video recordings during this side event. With this being said, let me pass the floor to Mr. Emin Husseinov, who will focus on the issue of arbitrary detention in Azerbaijan, the host country for the current climate change conference, COP29.
Thank you, Zahra. And dear colleagues, thanks for joining us today. And I'm Emin Husseinov, co-founder of the Climate Observers Partnership, which is established ahead COP29 campaign. We're planning to raise awareness around problems which is civil society start to receive since Azerbaijan elected as like host country. Many of our colleagues today jailed because Azerbaijan hosted COP29. Total numbers of the political prisoners increased 310%. Every week we have a new politically motivated arbitrary detention cases with the famous human rights defenders, environmental activists, whistleblowers, peaceful activists, etc., and political opposition party members. Unfortunately, we're not able to mention all of these names, but I would like to mention a few of them to better imagine what's going on in Azerbaijan. Imagine a person who is not able to take care of himself, Famil Khalilov, disabled activist, which is have a paralysis with the two hands. This guy arrested and detained because he's criticized the government of Azerbaijan to violate disabled people's rights ahead COP29. And now this person's staying under hunger strike almost more than 2 weeks. And every day we're able to lose him. Even like a famous climate change activist as like a Greta Thunberg start to raise awareness ahead COP29, especially related with the Famil Khalilov case. Still government don't want to show any kind of even small mercy to release this person who is able to die any moment. That's why we decide to inform international community. We have left 59 days until COP29, which is supposed to start on 11th of November and continue until November 21. And it's also not finished with this, since Azerbaijan able to provide successful, meaningful, as like government say, COP29 in Baku, they will start their presidency, which is continued until COP30 in Brazil. And imagine, main problem, what we received as like civil society of Azerbaijan and critical and outspoken voices, we received unprecedented level of crackdown against all of us. If usually each time ahead elections, presidential election, parliamentary election, normally we have like 100 political prisoners, and this political prosecution, arbitrary detention, working as like revolving door. Today, since Azerbaijan hosted COP29, these numbers of the arbitrarily detained critical voices increased at least 3 times. And we didn't know what's going on supposed to be in the next 2 months because politically motivated prosecution still continued. And we would like to ask for more solidarity for international community. My colleagues from Climate Observers Partnership, which is established by numbers of the Azerbaijani civil society organizations in exile, later will introduce our plans related with the joint petitions, which is everyone able to sign as like individual and on behalf of the organizations. But main problem again, today we have few colleagues which is staying under hunger strike, famous anti-corruption activist Fazil Gasimov. He's almost 2.5 months staying under hunger strike, and he lost half of his body values. Like if before he had 80 kilos, today it's 45 kilos. And this person, we have 2 persons who is able to lose his life any moment. And we try to remind to Azerbaijani government, if there's something happened with them, they have to be responsible at least for this. We have investigative environmental journalists who raise awareness at COP29, and government puts them to jail. It's number of these arbitrarily detained people, only journalists and human rights defenders, more than 35 people. And the new trends, what we start to observe, they start to arrest people and put them to jail like just with new accusation, with espionage, cooperation with Armenia, etc. Imagine like if you say something about peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia, you're able to arrest it. There's new trends with almost 2 persons arrested with this, like famous young activists and scholars. Everyone, like, as I said, from political opposition, from journalist community, from civil society received threats. Later, our colleagues also will mention the issues what's happened with Anar Mamadli. I don't want to inform you about this case, but this person also staying with us here in March 15, and right after we go back to Azerbaijan, he's arrested. I would like to stop my intervention here. I think it's better to give the floor to other colleagues. And when we have a Q&A sessions, we are happy to discuss about all necessary problems.
Thank you, Mr. Emin Husseinov, for your insight in the case of Azerbaijan and how we are witnessing a blatant disregard for fundamental rights. Next off, I will pass the floor to Mr. Khalid Ibrahim, who will focus on the cases of arbitrary detention in Egypt, the COP27 host country, and on the cases of arbitrary detention in the UAE, the COP28 host country.
Thank you a lot, Zahra. Thanks to all of you for making time to attend this sad event. Thanks to my colleagues, the distinguished speakers. And I will start to talk first about the open joint letter that the organizers and some other NGOs, including FIDH and OMCT, sent on the 13th of August this year to the Secretariat for the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, based in Germany, the UNFCCC. Now we called them to stop hosting Conference of Parties COP, annual climate summits in authoritarian countries. We got the COP27 held in Egypt 2022, and then we got COP28 held in UAE in 2023, and then we got the common COP29 to be held in Baku, Azerbaijan, this year. Now, a bigger question, what is the greatest common denominator between the three countries? The lack of civic space. Don't tell me shrinking civic space. I could say it is almost foreclosure of civic space. Detention, arbitrary detention of human rights defenders who are just trying peacefully and legitimately to defend the human and civil rights of citizens in the three countries. I could go back to January 2022. It is Egypt, and we witnessed the closure of the oldest human rights organizations, the Arab Human Rights Network Information, ANHRI. It was really a serious blow for the independence human rights movement in Egypt to have this NGO deciding not to work anymore for human rights because of the repression. Now, furthermore, the same year, we witnessed a lot of arrests. Still, our colleague Ala Abdel Fattah is still in prison in Egypt, many others. But then, as you know, the COP27 held in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt with very little access to civil society activists and their organizations. I know if you made it to the summit, but the reality we are seeing at the moment, a lot of defenders moving out to work in exile for human rights, to just be more free. Tomorrow we have a sad event about those who are working in exile, transnational repression of people who are working in exile. Even Amina and me and our colleagues, we are working in exile, but still we are facing a lot of repression. This is the subject of tomorrow, but let me go back also to talk about UAE in 2023. Now, UAE, you can't say that the space is shrinking. The last defender is my colleague, Ahmed Mansour. He was detained in 2017, still in prison, still in solitary confinement since his arrest. Now, there is a famous case, UAE 91, that was initiated by authorities, the state security apparatus in 2011. All those members of UAE 91, defenders, academics, others, they were sentenced. Some of them, they completed their sentence, but authorities decided to keep them in prison. So during COP28, that is in December, while Amnesty and Human Rights Watch, they organized a protest, the authorities in UAE declared that there's a new case for all those who are still in prison. It is UAE 84. 84 citizens, mostly defenders. They faced new charges of membership in a terrorist organization. It is the same charge that they faced in 2011. But authorities, they want to keep them in prison. That is UAE. That is our colleagues. They are still in prison. And in all that, we have seen limited access to civil society organizations and the activists to all these summits. I could say that the advocacy actions and protests within the UN run blue zone is limited, severely limited. Our colleagues in Amnesty and Human Rights Watch who were allowed to UAE, they tried to organize a protest. They faced a lot of delay and a lot of restrictions. And when they conducted the protest, the response from UAE authorities was to create, as I told you, this new terrorist case against our people who we demanded them to be released. Now, what we need, really, we need to examine the participation of human rights abusing countries in all the UN mechanisms and activities. I know a lot of these repression countries, they are trying to take positions with the UN, they are trying to be members of the Human Rights Council. To be member of a Human Rights Council, you have to respect human rights, but they are not doing so. So we need a lot of work to prevent them from whitewashing, sport washing, and from using the large-scale UN event to downplay their massive human rights violations. You are talking about killing of the vendors. You are talking about torture. You are calling about disappearances, lot of disappearances. I want to conclude to really to say that it is time for the UNFCCC Secretariat to really ensure that all countries that are going to host the coup in the future, they comply with international human rights law. And they should not use coup as opportunities to a quick crackdown on human rights organizations and human rights activists. Also, from here, we have a united call on all the three governments and other governments to free all the prisoners of conscience. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ibrahim. Indeed, the level of arbitrary detention and politically motivated persecution you've mentioned are alarming. We will now present you a video intervention by Mr. Florian Erminger, who will highlight the case of Anar Mammadli, an imprisoned Azerbaijani human rights defender. I will also advise you to use the headphones for the audio quality.
Good afternoon to you in Geneva. My name is Florian Erminger. I'm the chairperson of a non-for-profit advisory group which manages the Anar Mammadli campaign to end repression in Azerbaijan. I speak to you today because nearly all independent civil society actors in Azerbaijan have been silenced. Media leaders are imprisoned. Repression is now targeting academics, scholars, and in particular the legal profession. You should be hearing from those colleagues, not from me. But the level of repression is such that this is no longer possible. The last to speak at the Human Rights Council was Anar Mammadli, who discussed the climate initiative that we set up. Shortly after returning to Baku, he was arrested, sentenced to pre-trial detention, and now faces criminal charges. We've since transformed the climate initiative into the Anar Mammadli campaign because openly discussing climate-related and environmental issues in Azerbaijan as ahead of COP29 without facing imprisonment simply became impossible. Mr. Mammadli was previously imprisoned a decade ago. At the time, the European Court of Human Rights found that there was no other reason than political grounds that could justify his detention. He is now living it all over again. His detention symbolizes the climate of repression ahead of COP29 as the authorities silence independent voices. And Anar Mammadli is not the sole political prisoner in Azerbaijan. There are over 300 political prisoners to date, according to Azerbaijani civil society. In this repressive environment, we call upon you, 1. Ahead of COP, urge for the release of Anar Mammadli and human rights defenders and civil activists, environmental activists, and journalists whose arrests are politically motivated. You can go on our website, you'll have 20 emblematic cases available there that should be released immediately and unconditionally. Number 2, press Azerbaijani authorities to repeal legislation designed to target human rights defenders and civil society and criminalize their activities. We will soon publish a report that documents a decade, an unprecedented decade of repression, where there was a build-up of legislation to now justify these detentions. And number 3, ensure your government participates to COP29 at a technical level without endorsing Azerbaijan's political leadership as a host country. Thank you to the organizers of this event for highlighting the situation in Azerbaijan at the Human Rights Council, and for allowing us to contribute with this video. Feel free to reach out for more information. And on behalf of the Anarma Madly campaign, thank you.
I would like to thank Mr. Florian Erminger, even though he was not able to be present today. Next off, I will give the floor to Mr. Yves Lador and his expertise in regards to climate action and human rights.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the organizers for organizing this event very, very timely, and thank you for your invitation to take the floor. Indeed, over the last years, we have seen a very worrying degradation of civil society's capacity to participate. If we try to think back even to the Copenhagen, which was actually a failure, but the Copenhagen conference was extremely participatory and very, very open. But over the last COPs, there has been several degradation and some steps. The very first one actually happened in Katowice, so it's just not an issue of North and South. It happened in Katowice when a number of climate experts and activists, basically coming from the Central European and Central Asian regions, were prevented, even though they had their badges and they had the accreditation to go to the Blue Zone. They were stopped at the border and sent back to their country, and a few of them were arrested in their hotel in Katowice and sent out of the country. So they were not arrested inside the country, although they were detained for their extradition. This was totally new. We never had that before. A very worrying element, and actually there was even a real attempt to bring these cases to the Compliance Committee of the Aarhus Convention, to which Poland is a party to. And it was not followed up for security reasons, because a number of the people concerned did not want to go any further, because they had not been, their Schengen visa was still effective, and they were basically threatened to lose it if ever we were doing any further steps. So that was problematic, and unfortunately did not get the attention that was needed. We did have also a problem in Glasgow. The good thing, it was not as severe as having arbitrary detention or arrests. But the first days in Glasgow were actually terrible. The rules of procedure were not followed at all. We were unable, all of us, indigenous people, civil society organizations, were blocked to get to the access where you had the discussion, the negotiation. And actually, to the point that it led that some of the discussions were basically, you have so many discussions going on, that a number of countries are very happy, said, oh, the NGOs are covering these issues, we'll get the information if it turns wrong. Well, no NGOs were following these discussions, and it did turn wrong. And actually, it even, the UK never should in its own step, because they had a very, very easy, a low-hanging result that could have happened at the end of the last week. And that turned to be a disaster, because they had forgotten human rights references. They took decisions which were totally terrible, so they had to stop the whole thing and get back. So it shows, it's not a detail when you prevent people to participate according to the rules. It was not a privilege we were asking. This is according to the rules. So this has happened in Poland, this has happened in the UK, and then of course, I won't go in what has been described to the last COPs. Now, what we just heard with the Amar Mamadi case is a new step. Because in what had happened before, you do have the problems of political, civil rights in a country, which interferes a bit with the way we can run the organization. For example, in the last two COPs, we were not able to do the usual big parade, which was possible before, in the street of the country itself. It had to be done just in the Blue Zone, limited to the Blue Zone. But in the Blue Zone, we were able to work correctly. We did have interference, we did have pressure, but of course, no arbitrary detention and so on. We were able, even in Dubai, to speak out with a lot of limitation, a lot of difficulty that were very well described, and worrying positions of the UN Secretariat. But nevertheless, things were able to be done at the end of the day. It is the very first time for COP29 that as we are preparing it with the organization inside the country, and when someone from the country came here in Geneva, was sitting at this table in last March with us, where we clearly say we are preparing together this. We were actually talking with a number of countries, trying to see how about having events, seminars in your embassy where we can start to discuss, some of the issues about COP, climate change in the region, water issues, because we know water is a big issue in Azerbaijan. Okay, let's talk about water issues, and having several seminars. Well, our colleague was arrested for that work. This is the very first time that we, as people working on environmental issues, on environmental rights, on climate change issues, we feel now directly threatened when we work in a COP. This did not, we were annoyed. We were really very annoyed what happened previously. We also demonstrated and did a clear demonstration about the problem in the country itself. Now the problems inside the country are now going into the COP itself. This is brand new, and it has consequences. For a lot of us now, we're wondering, should we go? And I had actually a phone call just an hour ago with the leader of another NGO asking, advices and so on. So this is a discussion going on now among among organizations planning to go to COP and saying, can we really go there? Who should we send? How dangerous will it be? There's a huge surveillance, the electronic surveillance. If we go there, what should we have? This is already a question that had happened before, but here this time it's extremely serious. And we also see today that a number of countries have issued very strict warnings to their own citizens. Do not go to Azerbaijan. Of course, this has impact for the NGOs who are in these countries. Because of course, should we send them? Basically, will we be protected if there's a problem? And if ever you're guaranteed, and we don't have any solid guarantee, but if ever there are guarantees to work normally in the blue zone, of course, you're at risk when you go back to your hotel. You'll be outside of the blue zone. And then whatever, if ever it seems that you should be getting out, we don't want you to continue your work in the blue zones, then you'll have a problem outside the blue zones. How will this be handled? This is one of the reasons why some countries are sending warnings, because they don't feel that they can really ensure full protection for their own citizens who will go to COP. We have the same problem with scientists now. You're a well-known scientist in your field, climate field, but you have an Armenian name. Do you think you're going to be comfortable to go to the COP? You're wondering. And we don't have any insurances. We have issues with the media. After the discussion we had with Anar here in March, I was interviewed by a Swiss media. At the end of the discussion, the journalist said, oh, by the way, just for you to know, my name is never on the articles, because it is too dangerous for me. If ever I go afterwards, I cannot have my name on the article. Here, in Geneva, journalists are right now censoring themselves because they wonder what should they say about a preparatory process if ever they have to go in Baku. Now, if ever you've worked on the regions and the different conflicts, and you clearly reported a number of elements, can you go and cover COP29 or not? This is dangerous for you. And there's risk you don't want to take. So we are in a very new situation, and I'll finish on this. What is happening now in Baku is something very new we didn't have before, which is that the security issues in the country have a direct impact in the credibility of the process and of the output. If ever, and we know that a number of countries will not send their main negotiators, because that can be too dangerous, will send low-profile delegations. What will be the seriousness? What will be the credibility of the output? If ever we know that it's been negotiated at a lower level because it's dangerous. And can you imagine the new elements which is being opened in multilateral negotiations, summits, COPs, meeting of the parties? Are we going now to use the location in order to start to influence the outcome of these summits? When until now the idea was, no, it must be free, there are clear universal rules, and everybody can participate in a way regardless where it's taking place. Now, the regardless where it's taking place is at risk at this moment. So this is really very interesting, and we really call all states. I know there's a big discussions whether we should go or not in a place or another. What is probably the most important is now that there is a clear guideline for all meetings, all international meetings, all summits, that they fully respect all of the human rights, and that you can participate there, and that the local people can participate. And then all of these summits can be a very good opportunity for progress in the host countries. This is the trend we must look, but there is a real danger. I really want to focus on that, because what we're hearing is, oh, you're right, that's too bad if NGOs can't participate. That's not the issue anymore. The issue is what can be the credibility of a COP in a place where we know that repression is damaging the possibility of having a free negotiation and a free discussion within the COP itself. This is brand new, and we have to take care of this. And here the Human Rights Council should be much more strong on such an issue. This is fundamentally an issue of human rights for everybody. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yves Lador. Indeed, we must ensure the flow of vital information in regards to climate change in order to provide solutions, and that human rights and climate justice must remain inseparable. I will now give the floor to Ms. Diana Nazareth, who will be presenting the Climate Observers Partnership Coalition and the COP29 campaign.
Thanks, Zara. Can I have the presentation? Yeah, and I want to thank my fellow panelists for briefing you on the ongoing situation in Azerbaijan. I think they made it very clear that the level of crackdown in the country is unprecedented, and after the imprisonment of Anar, it became clear that we have to take action here in exile, and that's how we established Climate Observers Partnership, the coalition that aims to promote human rights and inclusive climate action in Azerbaijan. With COP29 to be held this November in Baku, it presents a unique opportunity to support Azerbaijani human rights activists and highlight civic space demands. Next slide, please. In response to the ongoing crackdown, we launched a campaign to raise more awareness of the issue, particularly in regard to the right of freedom of expression, association, assembly, media freedom, journalists, and civil society members' safety. The main 5 key objectives of the campaigns are highlighting human rights violations in the country, ensuring media freedom, promoting environmental activism, filing the information vacuum that is present in the country, and supporting rights holders. Next slide. No previous one? Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, great. The campaign has established its own petition, and the easiest way to join the campaign is actually to read it and to join it, to sign it. The campaign calls for the immediate release of all political prisoners, all prisoners of conscience in Azerbaijan, and protect civic freedoms. It highlights the deteriorating human rights situation ahead COP29, which risks undermining the credibility of COP itself. The petition urges Azerbaijan to uphold international obligations, protect civil society, and ensure an open participation in climate discussion. Now the last one. You can scan the QR code and read the full text of the petition and sign it in the most comfortable platform for you. I believe that this is the crucial moment, and this is the time to make a decision to support and stand with solidarity with Azerbaijani people who now are suffering with enormous crackdown in their own country. I believe that Human Rights Council is the place to talk and the place to call on Azerbaijan to hold the persecution of those trying to protect themselves and trying to call out the problems that exist in their own country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Diana Nazareth. Now I would like to open the floor to our audience if there are any questions or remarks. Yes, you have the floor.
Yeah, actually, I just had a question for probably all of you that have knowledge of the organization of the recent COPs. As far as the agreements that are done between the UNFCCC and the countries, and in past COPs, it seemed that those agreements have been confidential. I'm just wondering if you may have been able to have any sense of access to these agreements this time round? Is there any anything that any of you have been able to see regarding those agreements?
I'm asked lead.
I didn't present myself.
Yeah.
My name is Paula Dupuy-Bias with Geneva Solutions.
I'm personally make request for lead Azerbaijan negotiation. Is Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Azerbaijan during the 3 days right after when they signed this agreement during the Bonn Climate Change Conference. And he denied to share with us. He said, you should ask like secretariat of the UNFCCC. But as I know, for some partners, international organizations which have more expertise with the climate change, they also ask, still, I don't know, maybe if able to see or Justice or other organization, still agreement not public. But their name, because since COP29 it must be public, but still until today we don't have access. We will continue our tries, no matter how many times. We still have 59 days until COP29 opening ceremony in Baku, and we can able technically send them 59 written requests, because according to the Azerbaijani law, even any citizen, like no matter you are Azerbaijani citizen or you are able to ask Azerbaijani officials, could you please share this document? I'm asked him on behalf of the few witnesses, on behalf of the witnesses which is the Azerbaijani independent journalists. He said we will see, and I wait 3 days, no hope. But still maybe we can somehow manage to, if we have some whistleblowers from UNFCCC. But again, I believe it's not like main problem for us right now. We have a bigger problem. Previous problem is take out of the prisons these 300 prisoners of conscience, and 35 of them is close colleagues of us, as like Eve mentioned, like Anar Mamadli and other, and Florian also mentioned like 20 famous journalists, activists. Most of them have a serious problem with the health, and this is not first time when they're in prison. As like Khalid Ibrahim said, for some United Arab Emirates activists are jailed again. The Anar Mamadli is jailed in 2013. It's first case in the European Court for Human Rights which is recognized political repressions, and clearly said this in the decision of the European Court for Human Rights. And government even until today not implemented this decision fully. And they are arrested him second time. We have political prisoners like Awaz Zeyn Ali, journalist. He's arrested 4 terms. Like, you know, it's Azerbaijan, sometimes we have a joke, like I think President Aliyev, who's staying already 5th presidential terms and change constitutions, he has some hobbies to put for unlimited imprisonment terms his opponents. Like Bakhtiar Hajiyev, 2nd imprisonment. Like for other people, like famous scholars, professors, like anti-corruption experts who expose Aliyev's corruptions, they are arrested with corruption accusations. And this country, when we always say, imagine like, president is like a king, like he delivered his power from his father. And his father staying in power from 1969 until 89. We have only 2 years existence of democratic elected government, and after in 93 they make a coup again. Haydar Aliyev came to the power. He died in 2003, and with a very mysterious condition, transferred this power as like Bashar Assad received his power from his father Anwar Assad. The same situation repeated in North Korea or and Azerbaijan hosted this. And now it's not enough. He's appointed his wife, Madame First Lady Mehriban Aliyev, as like a first vice president. It's like ridiculous. It's against Azerbaijani constitutions. Azerbaijan ratified the UN Convention Against Corruption, but this family controlled everything. Like we have 310 political prisoners in the jail, and we have 10 million prisoners outside. It's because Azerbaijan now it's a big concentration camp. We don't have any more like a free independent civil society inside the country, most of our colleagues jailed, most of our colleagues from media institutions, civil society institutions start to implement self-censorship, which is absolutely understandable. And you know, what Khalid mentioned, and Eve also, we received this petition, which is Diana mentioning, months ago. And when I start to speak with my colleagues during the Bonn Climate Change Conference, and since we received, start to distribute this petition, why guys you are not signing? They say, we are afraid to sign, because even if we are human rights organization, like international organization, we will send our representatives to Baku. Some already our friends and partner organization asking for, could we sign your petition right after when we bring back our colleagues from Baku, because next year it's also Azerbaijani presidency, which is continued until COP30. We can continue our campaign. It's not finished in November, but people, international community, largest human rights organizations, sometimes afraid because they have a serious concern about safety and security of their own stuff, which is supposed to go to Baku. And when somebody asks me, could you give us some kind of due diligence or something, we're not able to provide any information. Everything is possible to happen. Even like some countries, as you say, make a announcement for don't go to Azerbaijan, it's risky. And we are afraid for situation in Azerbaijan may be changed, because after COP29, it looks like for maybe we have a next disaster with destabilization, maybe some kind of war in the region, etc. But we believe we are afraid for after COP29 in Baku, repression against civil society increase as like in United Arab Emirates. That's what is our biggest concern. That's why we are calling for more solidarity.
Could I just briefly I add to that, whatever the agreement between the UN and the host countries, really it is in the very heart of the mandate of the UN to protect human rights. What is happening in these countries is just something unbelievable. You have no right to peaceful assembly. You have no right to raise a photo of a prisoner of conscience. So all that in front of the UN. All what I could say that the UN has to respect its mandate. It has to protect human rights in the host countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to add? If not, if there are no further questions or... Okay, you have the floor.
Thank you. Human Rights House Foundation, thank all of the panelists for your lucid interventions on what is indeed a very timely matter. We're, of course, just a couple of months out from COP. Anama Mudley spoke here in March. He was arrested and put into pretrial detention in April. So this is now some months ago. Do panelists get a sense that states really do see the gravity of this issue? I completely agree with what Eve said. You know, there's a question mark actually over the climate negotiations themselves and their legitimacy if there's not an ability for all stakeholders to participate in the negotiations in a free and fair fashion. So my question is, you know, are we seeing states really putting pressure on Azerbaijan, really encouraging Azerbaijan to put forward concrete assurances about not just the treatment of its own civil society, but those outsiders who will come to Baku? And if not, maybe you might venture, you know, some ways to kind of overcome this. Of course, very aware that Azerbaijan, you know, geopolitically is an important state for I think, for many countries. And my concern is that maybe there are some that, because of their relationship with Azerbaijan, kind of look to fudge their way through this process a little bit, and that would be a real tragedy. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We can try to answer to this. I'm not sure I have a full picture of all of the detail because a lot of these discussions are happening behind doors and are not always reported. So I hope I'm not unfair to some countries who are doing some efforts. But we do have a bit the trend that, the feeling that there's a trend to say, okay, that's a bad moment to go through. We agree, it's really problematic, and so it's going to be a weak COP, and to the point that we see, but not only states, but also NGOs and others, they're actually basically preparing for COP30 in Brazil, because everybody says, okay, Brazil, we're going to be at the heart of the matter, and of course, unfortunately, with what we heard the last days with the fires in Amazonia, will be really at the heart of the matter. And we know that Brazil, you might disagree with some policies, but you'll be able to talk about it. And Brazil is very clear, it's opened, you have a very active civil society, you have very, very important scientists in Brazil and so on. So, in a way, people are just, stepping over COP29 and say, yeah, too bad. That's where I think there's a danger which is underestimated. Because if ever this happens to be a good way, and there's a proof that, in a way, if you choose a location like that, you can, make the whole thing weaker, and then get perhaps the process go out of the road if ever it goes a bit further. Then we're giving ideas for future COPs, where you start. There was no strategy, such a strategy here for the decision to go to Baku. Let's be very clear. No intention whatsoever. It happens to come like that because of a number of geopolitical circumstances. So there was not a plan or whatsoever. But it happened that because, in a way, we see that there is some kind of a trend to say, well, too bad, and we'll just step over and think at the next step. Then we are opening the door to have a possibility to undermine international process. And this is extremely dangerous for the future. And of course, it's very bad for what's happening in the region. Once you look at all of the impacts of these non-interventions and basically looking away from what is a reality, not only you see that you will have a weak COP, but you see that this is also undermining we're not using this COP to precisely in a region where you have conflicts, where you have a lot of issues which are directly related to the climate change questions. Any oil state is part of the problem to some area. But of course, an oil state that stops to export oil has no revenue anymore. So it's not an easy issue you're going to solve just like that. So you must address it. And if ever there's no possibility to talk, if scientists are not able to really come with their own free solutions, the way they thought about it, whether you agree or not, but you do have this debate. If you don't have it, then you're not even helping the whole process to deliver. And if we don't deliver on climate change, we're all doomed. Let's be clear about that. We are all doomed. This is why the question of human rights and climate change, human rights and the environment in general, is so crucial. It's not a side issue. It's a fundamental issue to human rights itself. So this is more than just a lost opportunity. It's a worrying trend where we could see that some states are not basically taking their full responsibilities and trying to do their utmost to make sure that their people are protected from very severe environmental degradation which are affecting their rights and basically the future of their own country. So it's not a minor issue. It is really a fundamental one. And I would agree with what you said that perhaps we see that it is not treated the way and at the level where it should be.
Thank you very much. Mr. Amin Husseinov, would you give us insight in regards to the current situation in Azerbaijan in regarding the parliamentary elections?
So it's a very interesting part of COP29 because first Azerbaijani government tried to use successfully this for whitewashing themselves as they're looking to this as great greenwashing tools. And they try to whitewash their toxic, kleptocratic, and authoritarian image, which they are created by themselves for the last 31 years of existence of Azerbaijani ruling Aliyev regime. So, as I said, was President Aliyev staying in power already since 2003, 10 years his death, covered the presidential floor. But today, what's happened right after COP? Aliyev, which has changed constitution as he wants, and increased the presidential term after to 7 years. Right after when he make a deal with the UN member states about COP29 host country status, he called for snap presidential elections 1.5 years early. And our colleague Anar Mammadli is not only, we are starting to act as like a climate change activist, me and Anar and others, since we get this COP29 host country status, because we understand it's something bigger coming and we need to prepare. But the main work of Anar is observation of the elections. And imagine, he's arrested again for the same stuff, not only because he started to raise awareness for the COP29, because Aliyev decided to whitewash himself with the COP29, because no one want to come and see him from the like-minded states, and he's called for snap presidential elections 1.5 years early, in this February 7th. And another make reporting together with us and other partners, which is we are able somehow, with very limited human and financial resources, observe these elections. We do this voluntarily, all of us, including him. And he's punished him again for the same stuff. He said, for all your activities illegal, and even some journalists asked him for why you jailed this person. Even European Court for Human Rights decided for you need to recover all of his violated rights. Nothing happened. And it's a famous human rights defender which has received Václav Havel Award from the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly. And Azerbaijan, I try to remind you, is Council of Europe member states. We are under jurisdiction of the European Convention of Human Rights. And what's happened now is not enough for Aliyev. He decided to whitewash his puppet parliament. He just like do like this and say, look, parliamentary elections supposed to be on 3rd of November in Baku, because many journalists right now start to, I received like a dozen calls per day from foreign journalists. Could you give us like insight, like information about this? But elections supposed to be, snap parliamentary elections, not this snap, in this 1st of September. Aliyev switched them 2 months early because he don't want for opposition or civil society raise awareness, use opportunities for international attentions, go to the protest, make some kind of peaceful demonstration. He need white picture, whitewashing process. And that's why he does the snap elections, and he punish again civil society, all guys who observe these elections, all independent candidates who participate. Right now they receive life threats, threats with arrest, and most of them now preparing to escape country. That's what happened. And imagine we are having another local elections, which is supposed to be in this December, and Aliyev even planning to switch them to the end, to the beginning of 2025, to the February, because again, when you have 2 months presidential campaign period, you have a right, according to Constitution, going and ask for peaceful protest. And imagine they can ask, since 2015, rights of peaceful association and assembly violated in Azerbaijan very seriously. No one able to get like any protest spot. Even in Azerbaijan, let's say in the middle of the city, they organize Formula 1 competition. None of from civil society able to make a peaceful protest. That we have, they successfully use the COP29, and in the end, again, we need to mobilize our resources and call to the international communities. Don't send your high-level representatives. I understand it's calling for boycott of COP29. It's not productive. We need to think about future of our planet. Think your stuff, but don't give opportunities to like-minded head of the state supposed to do not go to Azerbaijan. They need to ignore Aliyev and show him until you are not released. All of these people, if each like-minded head of the state call to Aliyev and say, for you have to release Anar Mammadli, I will come. Yeah, you can go and make a deal dictator to bring our people out. But if they are not released, anyone, ignore him. Maybe like a dictators and authoritarian rulers can go to Azerbaijan. They can always enjoy to each other. But don't send your head of the state, prime ministers, even like Minister of Foreign Affairs. Send someone like a technical staff, like talk about something and prepare yourself for COP30 in Brazil.
Thank you. I would like to express my thanks to our panelists for their insightful contributions and to the audience for your active participation. Thank you all for being here today.